everybody, so we're going to look at setting up our palette today. I'm starting off with a white gouache and I'm going to put it on the far left, and the reason I'm putting in a gouache paint instead of a watercolor paint is because of the opacity. So I like to give it a little space where it's there on its own and I don't confuse the fact that it's gouache and not watercolor, because again, it's much more opaque, and I usually use it for fine details at the end of a painting. So I'm using a couple of student grade paints for this palette, and I'm using colors that I don't normally use, but I'm setting this up for classes or experimental painting, and I thought I would show you a little bit on how to set up your palette from tube paints. This first yellow is a lemon yellow. And again, I don't usually use it. I usually use a Hansa yellow in place of lemon yellow, but lemon yellow is fine. What I'm doing is using the back of a brush that I'm not particularly fond of, and I am mixing it up once I've put it into the well. And the reason for that is because some of these less expensive paints tend to separate a little bit, and so you want to make sure that you are getting a nice consistency, that you're evening it out, and that when it dries evenly. So you'll find that different pigments actually separate a little differently from one another, and the same with the quality of paint. So this particular one, yellow ochre, I'm a big fan of this color. I use it a lot, and you'll see that when I first try to put it into my palette, a lot of the filler or the binder seems to have separated and is kind of coming out. And this is exactly why we want to take a few minutes to set our palette up and mix all these colors. Look at all of that. Now, what does that mean for the pigment? I'm not 100% sure. I think it will still bind to the paper correctly, but I'm going to have to be very cognizant about what's happening with my yellow ochre. Now again, this palette is set up for classroom use and experiments and exercises, so I'm not going to be painting anything for a client or any lasting artwork with these paints. It's an opportunity for me to try out some new colors and new color combinations, and so, you know, I'm worried about it, but I'm not too worried about it. So I'm just mixing this one up, trying to get that filler or blender, whatever it was that had separated, reincorporated with the pigment. Next up is burnt sienna. This is another color that I do enjoy, and I will put this in here because I'm familiar with it and I know how to blend it with some other colors that probably won't appear on this palette. But the yellow ochre and the burnt sienna are both really great colors that I enjoy and that I usually use in my own palette. The same with the next one, which is burnt umber, but you'll notice what's going to happen is I'm going to jump from burnt sienna over to burnt umber, and the pigment is going to become much thicker and a little bit more like a paste. This burnt sienna color was thicker than the yellow ochre, and then burnt umber is going to be even thicker. Now, Artist Loft is a store brand paint. I can't remember if it's Michael's or Hobby Lobby, but one of the two. And you'll see it goes in much like a paste, very, very thick. And I'm gonna spread it around and see how it goes, see if I have to add any water to reincorporate this. Oops, wrong side. And if I do need to add water, I can do that, or an extender of some kind, like a, I don't know, a gum Arabic might work, but in this case, I think it's all right. I'm going to just kind of blend it in here, fill it in. That pigment might actually end up being very strong. Just depends on the composition of that paint. So yeah, I'll have to keep an eye on that. It's obviously thicker than I would prefer, but the next one we're going to come to is the first of two blues, and blues and greens and reds. Blues stain. This one is Prussian Blue, and I have known it to stain. It's not my favorite blue. I prefer to use ultramarine blue, but this is the one that Koi seemed to put in the pack that I bought years ago. That's the other thing. These paints are a couple years old. They should still be fine, but we're using this Prussian Blue, and it stains. Now, this is a plastic palette, and you can see up underneath the paint tubes on the top part of my palette that blue has already stained it. I'm not concerned about that. I can generally mix paint on top of it, and it doesn't usually affect what I see the color mix as being too much. Sometimes you have to be careful because the translucency of watercolors this one's Cobalt, a bit brighter, well, a bit softer, I guess. I don't know how to explain that, but as I was saying, because it's a plastic palette, you can sun bleach this. You can, once it's cleaned out in between uses, you can definitely pop it out in the sun and let the sun kind of bleach that out a little bit, and it should come up just fine. But yeah, say you're trying to mix a green on top of a stained blue area, sometimes that staining can kind of alter how you view color, and so it's always good to have a test paper there. Crimson red. So my preferred red over crimson is Algerian crimson. No, sorry. is oh, the name is escaping me, for goodness sakes. Anyhow, this red is a very strong, highly pigmented red. It mixes really well with lots of colors, and it can be used with other earthy tones. Now, what you're probably seeing here with me struggling getting it out of the tube is, again, it's that store brand paint, and it's very gummy, and it's very thick and almost solid. I feel like what I need to do here is bring some water over. So I'm going to bring some water over here and just kind of drip it on, and then I'll try and mix it. And you'll see it's just sticking to the back of that brush, and it's getting just pasty and yucky. I'm going to have to get a little extreme here, and I'm going to have to try and reincorporate it with a lot more water. There's no guarantee that that's going to work, but I am going to add quite a bit more water, reincorporate the pigment, and let it dry and see when I go to use it for the first time whether or not it is viable. It might be past its prime. And that's unfortunate, but you know, student grade paint, and I've had it for a while. It's I'm probably pressing my luck with it. I'm taking a look now to see what store I actually bought it from. I don't remember which giant chain Artist Loft paints come from, or the Artist Loft brand. But I'm probably not going to ever buy that brand of watercolor paints again. I just want to make sure that I use up what I have, and I do enough throwaway paintings and experiments that this is the perfect way to use it up. So here I am adding a ton more water and trying to just get that paste into a nice smooth paint instead. I'm not worried about air pockets. I'm not really worried about how it looks. I just want it to be a nice smooth paint that I could use later on. So I switched over to a wide brush so I could fill it with paint strokes, pull along the edge of the well, and as you can see, I used a lot more water, which means this color is probably going to go on a little more pink than I'm used to, and I'm going to have to be cognizant of how much I've thinned it out already. There's a good chance, too, that it is going to shrink and crack a little bit as it dries, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. It doesn't really need to settle perfectly. The last color that I have chosen for my paintings is Carmine Red. This is a brighter red. It blends really well for vibrant and pastel-y, and makes a nice violet color. And yeah, it's an all-around nice red. It's a little bit warmer, I think, than the red that I usually am drawn to. I'm going to mix this one up. This one came out of, compared to the crimson, this one came out of the tube surprisingly smooth. And yeah, here I am mixing it up. Now I have these 2 extra spaces, and I was just going to leave them. But I decided I'm going to just kind of pick a couple of colors that I've never used, but that I've seen other people use in variation, you know, in other artist tutorials and other artists in person using these 2 colors. Well, not these specific colors, but I've seen people use orange and a very vibrant green with success. I think like a sap green and a vermilion hue. So I'm going to look for this orange. I do have a vermilion orange color, so I'm going to try and add that one in here. This will be a fun little pop of color. I normally just mix my own orange, but this will be kind of nice, and we'll see where it takes me. And then, of course, for the last one, I'm going to pick a bright green color, and I'm just kind of looking. I have 2 greens here. I have a Viridian green. I have a Viridian green. It's kind of a darker, bluer, like a cooler green. And I think, well, I still want it to be cool, but I think I want something that's a little more neon, for lack of a better word. Something that's brighter and a little more vibrant than I usually use, because I want to step outside my comfort zone here a little bit. So this one is called Yellow Green. I can imagine some instances with garden paintings and botanicals and stuff where this kind of green would be fun to work with, especially in, you know, different types of light. So yeah, there it is separating again. Oh, so much is coming out. I'm dabbing it off on the paper towel here to try and get as much out as possible. And there's that pigment. So I'm going to get that in there and mix it up. And so, yeah, that's in general how you want to set up your palette if you're working from tube paints, regardless of quality. You want to make sure that you have the broad range of colors that you think you're going to use, maybe an extra well or 2 just in case. And you want to get it into those wells. You want to mix it up so that your binder and your pigment are reincorporated, and then you'll be ready to go.